For many years, two Apache nations lived side by side. The Red Canyon Apache were led by Chief Dakota. The Eagle River Apache were led by Chief Chayton. Once they had been friends. They hunted together. They fought enemies together. They even dreamed of uniting their people one day. But that dream died 20 years earlier. A terrible raid had changed everything. During a violent attack, a young girl disappeared. She was the only daughter of Chief Chayton. The child vanished without a trace. Many warriors believed the Red Canyon Apache had taken her. Chief Chayton never found proof. Yet the loss poisoned his heart. Year after year, distrust grew between the two tribes. The friendship between the chiefs slowly turned into silence. Then silence became hatred. Now both men were older. Both were respected. Both were feared, and neither trusted the other. Far from the growing tension, another story was unfolding. In the Red Canyon village, a young woman named Ayana had become known throughout the land. She was brave, wise, and skilled with horses. Many young warriors admired her. Many hoped to marry her one day, but Ayana seemed different from everyone around her. She often felt as though she did not belong. She loved her people deeply, yet strange questions followed her everywhere. Her dark eyes looked different from those of her family. Her face carried features that did not resemble her parents. As a child, she had asked about it many times. Each time her mother smiled and changed the subject. As the years passed, Ayana stopped asking, but the questions never disappeared. One evening she sat beside the fire with her father. His name was Matto. A respected warrior, a good man, a man who loved her more than his own life. The old warrior stared into the flames. His face seemed troubled. Ayana noticed immediately. "Father, what weighs on your heart tonight?" Matto remained silent. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he looked at her. "There are truths that follow us like shadows, no matter how far we run. One day they always catch us." Ayana frowned. "I do not understand." Matto forced a smile. "Perhaps that is a good thing. Not all truths bring peace." Before Ayana could ask another question, a horn echoed through the village. Warriors rushed toward the center of camp. Messengers had arrived. They carried terrible news. A hunting party from Eagle River had disappeared near the border. Several horses had returned without riders. The Eagle River Apache immediately blamed Red Canyon. By sunrise, both tribes were preparing for war. Across the valley, Chief Chayton stood before hundreds of warriors. His voice thundered through the camp. "For 20 years, we have endured their lies. For 20 years we have waited. No more." The warriors raised their weapons. Their anger filled the air. At the same moment, Chief Dakota addressed his own people. He warned them to prepare for battle. No one knew who had attacked the missing hunters. But neither side wanted to listen. The drums of war had begun. That night Ayana could not sleep. A strange feeling haunted her. Something was changing, something larger than war, something larger than the hatred between the tribes. Deep inside, she felt as though an invisible hand was pulling her toward a forgotten past, toward a secret buried long ago, a secret powerful enough to destroy two nations or save them both. Far away, an old woman watched the stars from a lonely hill. She was known among many tribes as White Moon. Some called her a healer, others called her a prophet. She gazed toward the distant camps and whispered to herself, "The lost child has returned, and soon the truth will awaken." The old woman closed her eyes. The storm that had slept for 20 years was finally coming. And when it arrived, the lives of everyone in both tribes would change forever. The next morning the valley woke beneath a red sky. To the elders it was a warning. To the warriors it was a call. In the Red Canyon village, men sharpened knives and prepared horses. Women gathered food and medicine. Children watched in silence. Even the dogs seemed to understand that peace was leaving. Ayana walked through the camp with a heavy heart. She saw fear in the eyes of mothers. She saw anger in the eyes of young warriors. She saw pride in the faces of old men who had already buried too many sons. This war felt wrong. She could feel it in her bones. Near the horse pens she found Matto tying a leather strap around his arm. He was preparing for battle. Ayana stepped in front of him. "Father, do you truly believe Eagle River attacked our hunters years ago?" Matto did not answer. She looked closer at his face. That silence frightened her more than any weapon. "You know something." Matto lowered his eyes. "I know enough to fear what may come." "Then tell me. Please." Matto's hands trembled. For the first time in her life, Ayana saw the great warrior look weak. Before he could speak, Chief Takoda called the warriors together. The moment was gone. Matto mounted his horse. "Stay close to the women and elders. Do not ride near the border." Ayana grabbed his wrist. "You taught me never to hide from truth. Do not ask me to do it now." Matto looked at her with pain in his eyes. Sometimes truth comes like fire. It warms no one. It only burns. Then he rode away. Ayana stood alone as dust rose behind the warriors. By midday, the first clash came. Not a great battle. Not yet. Only a violent meeting between scouts from both tribes. No one died, but blood was spilled, and blood demands more blood when anger is already hungry. That evening a wounded Red Canyon scout was carried back to camp. His name was Hinto. He was young, barely old enough to wear the marks of a warrior. Ayana helped clean the wound on his shoulder. He winced but did not cry out. "What happened?" she asked. Hinto swallowed. "We found tracks near the dry creek." "Not Eagle River tracks." Ayana froze. "What do you mean?" "The horses were shod with iron. Apache horses do not leave marks like that." Ayana looked around quickly. "Did you tell Chief Takoda?" Hinto nodded. He would not listen. He said Eagle River may have traded for iron shoes. But I saw something else. "What?" "A piece of blue cloth on a thorn bush, like the cloth worn by soldiers from the fort." Ayana felt cold. The fort white soldiers. Could they be behind the missing hunters? Before Hinto could answer, Matto entered the shelter. His face changed when he saw them speaking. "That is enough. Hinto needs rest." Ayana stood. "Father, if soldiers cause this, if someone wants our tribes to fight..." Matto seized her arm. "Not here. Not where ears can drink words and turn them into poison." He led her outside. The moon was rising over the canyon. For a while neither spoke. Then Matto said quietly, 20 years ago, on the night Chief Chaitin lost his daughter. There were also iron horseshoe marks near the river. Ayana's breath caught. You knew Matto closed his eyes. I saw them. Others saw them too. But grief was louder than reason. Chaitin believed Takoda had betrayed him. Takoda believed Chaitin wanted someone to blame. And in the middle of that chaos, a child disappeared, Ayana whispered. What happened to the child? Matto turned away. I do not know. His answer came too quickly. Ayana heard the lie. Before she could press him, a distant cry rose from the hills. A woman's cry, sharp, desperate. Ayana ran toward the sound before Matto could stop her. Beyond the last fires of camp, she found an old woman standing among the rocks. White hair, thin shoulders, eyes bright as stars. It was White Moon. Ayana had heard stories of her. The old woman stared at her as if seeing a ghost. At last she said, "The river has brought you back to the edge of memory." Ayana stepped closer. "Do you know me?" White Moon lifted a trembling hand. "I knew you before you had a name." Ayana's heart pounded. Matto arrived behind her. His face turned pale. "White Moon, do not." The old woman ignored him. She looked only at Ayana. "There is a scar beneath your left shoulder, shaped like a small crescent." Ayana stepped back. No one outside her family knew that. White Moon spoke again. "You were wrapped in a blanket with black feathers stitched on the corner." Matto's voice broke. "Enough." Ayana turned to him. "How does she know that?" Matto could not speak. The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was there the night you were found. And the name given to you at birth was not Ayana." The wind moved through the canyon. The fires of the village flickered behind them. Ayana felt the world tilt beneath her feet. White Moon whispered the words that would change everything. "You are the lost daughter of Chief Chaitin." The words struck Ayana like a bolt of lightning. For a moment she could not breathe. The lost daughter of Chief Chaitin, the daughter whose disappearance had poisoned 2 tribes for 20 years. It could not be true. Yet something inside her trembled, a feeling she could not explain. She looked at Matto, the man who had raised her, the man she had called father her entire life. His head was lowered. His silence told her more than any words. "Tell me she is lying," Ayana said. Matto remained motionless. "Tell me." His shoulders slowly sank. When he finally raised his eyes, they were filled with pain. "I wish I could." Ayana felt tears gathering. "You knew. For all these years, you knew." Matto nodded. "Not at first. When I found you, I believed you were an orphan left behind during a raid. You were barely 3 years old, alone, terrified, covered in dust. I brought you home." Ayana stared at him. "And then?" "Months later, an old healer recognized the blanket that had been wrapped around you. The blanket belonged to Eagle River. The truth became impossible to ignore." White Moon stepped forward. "I begged him to return you. But by then war had already begun between the tribes." Matto spoke softly. "If I had returned you, then they would have killed each other. Neither side trusted the other." Ayana shook her head. "So you decided for everyone. You stole my life." Matto closed his eyes. "I saved your life." The words hung heavily in the air. Ayana turned and ran. She needed air. She needed distance. She needed to escape the truth. She climbed a ridge overlooking the valley. Below her, the campfires glowed like scattered stars. Everything she had known felt broken. Her family, her name, her past, even her future. Before dawn, she made a decision. She would go to Eagle River herself. She would find Chief Chaitin. She would learn the truth from him, no matter the cost. As the first light touched the horizon, she saddled her horse. She carried only water, food, and a small knife. She slipped away before most of the village awakened, but she was not alone for long. Several miles from the canyon, she heard hoofbeats. Ayana reached for her knife. A young warrior emerged from the trees. His name was Kanji, one of Red Canyon's finest scouts. "What are you doing here?" Ayana asked. "Saving you from doing something foolish alone," she sighed. "Go back. I cannot. Chief Takoda ordered me to watch over you after what happened last night." Ayana almost laughed. "Then I already escaped your watch." Kangi smiled, not very successfully. Despite everything, she was grateful for the company. Together they rode toward Eagle River territory. The journey lasted most of the day. Near sunset, they reached a narrow valley. Then they saw something unexpected. Smoke, not from a campfire, from burning wagons. They approached cautiously. The scene shocked them. 3 supply wagons had been destroyed. Several bodies lay nearby. None were Apache. All wore military uniforms. Soldiers from the frontier fought. Kangi dismounted. Someone attacked them recently. Ayana knelt beside one of the bodies. An arrow protruded from the man's chest, but something felt wrong. The arrow was Apache, yet the feathers had been tied incorrectly. Whoever used it did not understand Apache traditions. Kangi noticed the same thing. This was meant to look like an Apache attack. Ayana's heart raced. Someone wants the tribes at war. Before they could investigate further, a voice thundered from the rocks. "Do not move." Within seconds, armed warriors surrounded them. Eagle River warriors, at least 20, their bows were drawn. Their leader stepped forward, a tall warrior with sharp eyes. His name was Wikasa. Ayana recognized him from stories, one of Chief Chaitan's most trusted fighters. Wikasa looked at her clothing, Red Canyon colors. His expression darkened. "You have crossed into our land, and now you stand among murdered soldiers. Give me one reason not to arrest you." Ayana took a slow breath. "Because I came seeking the truth." Wikasa laughed coldly. "The truth died long ago." Then his eyes suddenly fixed on something hanging from Ayana's neck, a small silver pendant, the only possession she had carried since childhood. The warrior's face went pale. "Where did you get that?" Ayana touched the pendant. "I have always had it." Wikasa stared in disbelief. That pendant belonged to Chief Chaitan's missing daughter. Silence filled the valley. Every warrior froze, and for the first time, Ayana realized the truth might be even bigger than she had imagined. The valley fell silent. Every Eagle River warrior stared at the silver pendant hanging from Ayana's neck. Even Wikasa seemed unable to speak. At last he stepped closer. His eyes never left the pendant. "Where did you get it?" Ayana swallowed. "I do not know. I have carried it for as long as I can remember." Wikasa slowly reached into a small leather pouch hanging from his belt. He pulled out a faded piece of cloth. The cloth was old and worn by time, yet the symbol embroidered on it matched the symbol engraved on Ayana's pendant. Several warriors gasped. "It cannot be," one whispered. Wikasa looked at Ayana again. This symbol belonged only to Chief Chaitan's family. No other family in Eagle River carried it. Ayana felt her heart pounding. "Then take me to him. Take me to Chief Chaitan." Wikasa hesitated. "If you are lying, you will regret it." "If I am not," Ayana replied, 20 years of hatred may have been built on a lie." The warriors exchanged uneasy looks. Finally, Wikasa nodded. "Bind neither of them. We ride." As darkness settled over the land, The group traveled toward Eagle River Village. Ayana barely spoke. Kangji rode beside her in silence. For the first time he seemed afraid, not of battle, not of death, of what the truth might do. Near midnight they arrived. The village was larger than Ayana had imagined. Dozens of fires burned beneath the stars. Warriors stood guard around the perimeter. Children slept in their lodges. Old women whispered around cooking fires, yet tension hung over everything. The entire tribe was preparing for war. When Chief Chaitan emerged from his lodge, the crowd immediately parted. He was tall despite his age. His hair had turned grey. His face carried the scars of many battles, but his eyes revealed something deeper. Loss. Years of loss. Vikasa approached him. "Chief, there is something you must see." Chaitan's eyes settled on Ayana. At first he showed no reaction. Then he noticed the pendant. The old chief froze. The world seemed to stop. His hand trembled. Slowly he walked forward. "Where did you get that?" His voice was barely a whisper. Ayana could not answer. For a moment she saw tears forming in the eyes of the feared Apache leader. The sight shocked everyone. No warrior could remember seeing Chaitan cry. The chief reached toward the pendant but stopped, as if afraid it would disappear. "What is your name?" "Ayana." The chief closed his eyes. The name hurt him. "My daughter was called Nayeli." The silence became unbearable. Then White Moon's words echoed in Ayana's mind. "You are the lost daughter." She took a deep breath. "An old healer believes I am Nayeli." Gasps spread through the crowd. Several warriors exchanged nervous looks. Chaitan stared at her. "Impossible. For 20 years I searched. For 20 years I followed every rumor, every trail, every lie." My daughter was gone. Ayana slowly removed the pendant and handed it to him. The old chief examined it carefully. Then something unexpected happened. A small compartment hidden inside the pendant opened. Nobody had ever noticed it before. A folded piece of leather fell into Chaitan's hands. The chief stared at it in disbelief. His hands shook violently. "What is it?" Vikasa asked. Chaitan unfolded the leather. A symbol had been drawn inside, a symbol recognized by every elder, the mark of the frontier fort. The soldiers. Ayana felt a chill. The chief looked up. Suddenly, the anger in his eyes vanished. In its place came confusion, then realization. 20 years ago. The soldiers were near our lands, the same week my daughter disappeared. Kanji stepped forward. "We found dead soldiers today. Someone made it look like Apache warriors attacked them." The crowd erupted into worried voices. Chaitan raised his hand for silence. Slowly the pieces began fitting together. Someone had taken his daughter. Someone had manipulated both tribes. Someone had fed their hatred for 20 years. Before anyone could speak again, a wounded scout burst into the village. His horse collapsed from exhaustion. The warrior fell to his knees. "Chief!" the scout shouted. "The fort soldiers are moving, more than 100, and they are heading toward the valley between both tribes." A dangerous silence followed. Chaitan's face hardened. For years he had prepared to fight Red Canyon. Now another possibility stood before him. Perhaps the real enemy had never been Red Canyon at all. Perhaps someone else had wanted the tribes divided from the beginning. And if that was true, a far greater storm was about to begin. The news spread through Eagle River like wildfire. More than 100 soldiers were moving toward the valley, the same valley that separated the two Apache tribes. Many warriors immediately demanded war. Some wanted to attack the soldiers. Others still wanted revenge against Red Canyon. The village filled with angry voices. Chief Chaitin listened in silence, then he stood. The crowd became quiet. For 20 years I believed another Apache tribe stole my daughter. Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps someone wanted us divided. I will not lead my people into another blind mistake. Some warriors nodded. Others looked unconvinced. Ayana watched the old chief carefully. She saw strength in him, but she also saw pain. The pain of a father who had lost half his life searching for answers. Later that night, Chaitin asked Ayana to meet him alone. They sat beside a small fire. Neither knew how to begin. Finally, Chaitin spoke. When you were little, you loved horses. You always tried to feed them before feeding yourself. Ayana looked at him in surprise. How do you know that? The chief smiled sadly. Because you were my daughter. The words hit her harder than she expected. For years she had wondered who she truly was. Now the answer sat before her. Yet it felt strange. She still loved Matto. She still considered Red Canyon her home. Chaitin seemed to understand. I do not expect you to call me father. Not yet, perhaps not ever. But I am grateful you are alive. Ayana felt tears forming. For the first time she saw the man not as a chief, not as a warrior, only as a father. Before either could say more, footsteps approached. Wicasa arrived quickly. Chief scouts have returned. They captured a soldier. Within minutes everyone gathered around the prisoner. The man was wounded and exhausted. His hands were tied. At first he refused to speak. Then Chaitin placed the silver pendant before him. The soldier's face immediately changed. He recognized it. Ayana noticed the fear in his eyes. You know this pendant. The soldier remained silent. Wicasa stepped forward. Answer him. Still nothing. Finally the soldier whispered, Captain Briggs. The name meant nothing to most of the warriors. But the soldier continued. 20 years ago he led a secret mission. He was ordered to create conflict between Apache tribes. The crowd erupted. The soldier lowered his head. A child was taken, a daughter of a chief. The plan was to blame another tribe. The hatred would weaken both sides. Silence followed. Ayana felt cold. Chaitin clenched his fists. Where is Briggs now? The soldier swallowed, leading the force coming toward the valley. The entire village froze. For 20 years, one man had hidden behind lies. For 20 years tribes had suffered because of him. Now he was returning, and this time he brought an army. Chaitin slowly stood. His eyes were filled with determination. Prepare the horses. Tomorrow we ride to Red Canyon, not as enemies, as allies. For the first time in 20 years, the fate of both tribes would rest in the hands of two chiefs who had every reason to hate each other, and one young woman who belonged to them both. At sunrise, Chief Chaitin and his warriors rode toward Red Canyon. No one knew how Chief Takoda would react. For 20 years both tribes had lived with distrust. One mistake could still start a war. Ayana rode beside Chaitin. Behind them came Wicasa and dozens of warriors. When they reached the border, Red Canyon scouts appeared almost immediately. Bows were raised. Hands moved toward weapons. The tension was unbearable. One scout galloped back toward the village. Minutes later, Chief Takoda himself arrived with his warriors. The two chiefs faced each other across the valley. Neither spoke at first. They had once called each other brother. Now they looked like strangers. Then Chaitan dismounted. Many warriors gasped. No chief would place himself at such risk. Slowly he walked forward. Takoda remained still. Finally Chaitan stopped a few steps away. "I came for peace." The words shocked everyone. Takoda narrowed his eyes. Peace does not usually arrive with 50 warriors. Chaitan nodded. Nor does truth. Ayana rode forward. The moment Takoda saw her beside Chaitan, his face changed. He immediately understood that something important had happened. Within the hour, both tribes gathered in the center of Red Canyon. The captured soldier was brought before everyone. Again he told his story. Again he spoke of Captain Briggs. Again he described the kidnapping of Chaitan's daughter. When he finished, silence covered the camp. Takoda slowly looked toward Chaitan. "For 20 years, you believed I took her." Chaitan lowered his head. "And for 20 years, I was wrong." The words were difficult for him to say, yet everyone heard them. Takoda stepped closer. "For years I hated you for the accusations. For years I blamed you for every death between our tribes." The two old chiefs stood face to face. Ayana feared they might begin fighting. Instead, Takoda extended his hand. The valley became silent. After a long moment, Chaitan took it. A cheer erupted from both tribes. Many warriors could hardly believe what they were seeing. The hatred of 20 years was finally breaking. But their celebration did not last long. A scout raced into camp. His horse was exhausted. "Chiefs, the soldiers are moving faster than expected." "They will reach the valley tomorrow." The camp immediately turned serious again. That evening, both tribes met around a large fire. Warriors discussed plans. Scouts shared maps. Elders offered advice. For the first time in decades, the tribes worked together. As darkness fell, Ayana sat alone near the edge of camp. Mato approached quietly. She looked up at him. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, Mato sat beside her. "Are you angry with me?" Ayana stared into the fire. "Part of me is. Part of me always will be." Mato nodded. "I understand. You deserved the truth." Ayana looked at him. "You gave me a life. You protected me. I can never hate you for that." The old warrior's eyes filled with relief. Then she smiled softly. "You may not be my father by blood, but you will always be my father." Mato lowered his head as tears appeared in his eyes. It was the first time Ayana had ever seen him cry. The next morning, a new danger appeared. Scouts returned with alarming news. Captain Briggs was not traveling alone. More soldiers had joined him during the night. The force was nearly twice as large as expected. Over 200 armed men were now approaching. The warriors exchanged worried looks. Even united, the battle would be difficult. Chief Takoda rose. Then Chief Chaitan stood beside him. For the first time in 20 years they addressed both tribes together. "Tomorrow we fight as one people." The warriors raised their weapons. A thunderous cry echoed across the valley. The battle that would decide the future of both tribes was finally coming, and somewhere among the approaching soldiers, the man responsible. For 20 years of suffering was riding toward his destiny. The night before the battle felt endless. Few warriors slept. Some sharpened weapons. Others sat beside the fires, speaking quietly with their families. No one knew who would still be alive when the sun set the next day. Ayana walked through the camp. For the first time she saw Red Canyon and Eagle River warriors sitting together, sharing food, sharing stories, laughing. It was a sight that would have been impossible only days earlier. Near midnight, she found Chiefs Takoda and Chaitan studying the valley. A map had been drawn in the dirt. "The soldiers will enter through the northern pass," Takoda said. "They will believe we are divided." Chaitan nodded. "That will be their mistake." At dawn, the tribes took their positions. Warriors hid among rocks and trees. Scouts watched every movement. The valley became silent. Then the soldiers appeared, hundreds of them. Their rifles gleamed beneath the morning sun. At their front rode Captain Briggs. His hair had turned grey over the years, but his cold eyes had not changed. He smiled when he saw the empty valley. He believed victory was already his. The soldiers advanced deeper. Then Takoda raised his hand. A signal echoed through the hills. Suddenly, Apache warriors emerged from every direction. The soldiers froze. Briggs's smile vanished. Arrows filled the sky. The battle exploded across the valley. Warriors charged from the rocks. Soldiers scrambled to form lines. Dust rose everywhere. The sound of shouting and gunfire echoed through the mountains. Ayana fought beside the scouts. She carried a bow and moved quickly between the rocks. Several times she helped wounded warriors escape danger. Nearby, Kangi battled fiercely. Wikasa fought beside him. Only weeks earlier, they would have been enemies. Now they protected each other. The battle raged for hours. Slowly the soldiers began losing ground. Their plan had failed. The tribes were united. Then disaster struck. Captain Briggs spotted Chief Chaitan directing warriors from a ridge. He gathered several soldiers and attacked. The old chief suddenly found himself surrounded. Ayana saw it happen. Without hesitation, she rode toward him. "Chaitan!" The chief turned. A soldier was rushing toward him from behind. Ayana fired an arrow. The soldier fell, but more kept coming. For a moment, father and daughter stood together, fighting side by side, the way fate had intended years ago. Then Briggs appeared. The captain recognized Ayana immediately. His face darkened. "You should have died 20 years ago." The words shocked everyone nearby. Chaitan's eyes burned with fury. "You took her," Briggs laughed. "Your tribes were easier to control when you hated each other." The captain raised his weapon. Before he could act, Takoda arrived from the ridge. The two chiefs stood together. The sight alone seemed to break Briggs' confidence. For years he had depended on their division. Now they were united. The battle continued around them, but the soldiers were weakening. One by one they began retreating. The valley that Briggs believed he would conquer was slipping from his grasp. As the sun started falling toward the horizon, the captain gave the order to withdraw. The remaining soldiers pulled back. The Apache warriors cheered, but Chaitan did not celebrate. Neither did Takoda. They knew the war was not finished. Briggs had escaped. And as long as he remained free, the truth about the past would never be fully settled. That evening, scouts followed the retreating soldiers. When they returned, they brought unexpected news. Briggs and a small group had abandoned the army. They were heading toward an old abandoned fort in the mountains, a place filled with secrets from 20 years ago, a place where the final answers might be waiting. The next morning, Ayana, Takoda, Chaitan, Mato, Kangi, and Wikasa prepared to ride together. They were no longer searching for a missing daughter. Now they were hunting the man who had stolen 20 years from all of their lives. The journey to the abandoned fort lasted 2 days. The group rode through narrow canyons and rocky hills. No one spoke much. They all knew the end of the story was approaching. On the second evening, they finally saw the fort. It stood on a lonely ridge above the valley. Most of its walls had collapsed. Parts of the wooden fence had rotted away years ago, yet smoke still rose from inside. Briggs was there. Wicasa studied the area. There are guards, not many, maybe 20. Takoda nodded. He expected more. Briggs must have lost many men during the battle. Under cover of darkness, the Apache warriors moved closer. Scouts quietly eliminated the outer guards. No alarms were raised. Everything seemed too easy. That worried Chaitin. Briggs was clever. A man like him would not simply wait to be captured. Just before dawn, they entered the fort. The buildings were nearly empty. Broken crates lay scattered everywhere. Old military supplies covered the ground. Then Kangi found something. A locked room beneath the main building. The door was forced open. Inside were dozens of old documents, maps, orders, reports. Ayana picked up one of the papers. Her hands trembled. It contained Briggs's signature. Below it were written the words that changed everything. Operation Division. The objective is to create permanent conflict between neighboring Apache tribes. Several more documents confirmed the same thing: the kidnappings, the lies, the attacks. Everything had been planned. For 20 years, innocent people had suffered because of one man's ambition. Suddenly, a gunshot echoed outside. Everyone rushed from the room. Briggs stood near the northern gate. Several armed soldiers remained beside him. The captain smiled. "You finally found the truth." Chaitin stepped forward. "You stole my daughter. You destroyed countless lives." Briggs shrugged. "It worked. For 20 years your tribes hated each other. That was all that mattered." Takoda's eyes filled with anger. "You turned brothers into enemies." Briggs slowly raised his rifle. "And I would do it again." Before he could fire, a soldier beside him lowered his weapon. Then another, and another. Briggs looked around in disbelief. His own men were abandoning him. One of them stepped forward. "We followed orders, but not this. Not anymore." For the first time, Briggs seemed afraid. He tried to run. Kangi and Wicasa immediately cut off his escape. Within seconds, the captain was surrounded. The man who had hidden behind lies for 20 years finally had nowhere left to go. Chaitin approached him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the Apache chief lowered his weapon. Briggs looked surprised. "You will not kill me." Chaitin shook his head. "No. If I kill you, the hatred continues. Today it ends." The captain was taken prisoner. As the sun rose above the mountains, Ayana looked across the valley. The truth was finally known. The lies were finally broken. And for the first time in her life, she felt free. But one final decision still remained. She belonged to 2 families, 2 tribes, and now she had to choose what her future would be. The return journey felt very different. When the group left for the fort, they carried anger and unanswered questions. Now they carried the truth. Briggs rode as a prisoner between Apache warriors. The documents taken from the fort were carefully protected. Every page proved what had happened 20 years earlier. As they approached the valley, scouts raced ahead with the news. By the time they reached Red Canyon, hundreds of people were waiting. Warriors, elders, women, children, everyone wanted answers. That evening a great gathering was held between the two villages. Large fires burned across the valley. For the first time in living memory, both tribes sat together without fear. Chief Takoda stood before the crowd. Then Chief Chaitin joined him. The captured documents were read aloud. The people listened in silence. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others lowered their eyes in sadness. Many realized they had spent years hating people who had never been their enemies. When the reading ended, no one spoke for a long moment. Then an old warrior slowly stood. "My brother died during these years of hatred. I blamed Eagle River. Now I learn he died because of another man's lies." The old warrior looked toward the opposite tribe. "I do not want my grandchildren to carry this burden." Several others stood, one after another. The anger that had poisoned the valley for 20 years slowly began to fade. Later that night, Chaitin asked Ayana to walk with him. They followed a trail above the valley. Below them, the campfires glowed in the darkness. "Beautiful," Chaitin said quietly. Ayana nodded. "It feels different now." The chief smiled. "It does. For years I dreamed of finding you. I imagined this moment 1,000 times." Ayana looked at him. "Are you disappointed?" "Disappointed. I cannot stay in Eagle River forever," she said. "My home is also Red Canyon. Matto raised me. The people there are my family too." Chaitin stopped walking. For a moment Ayana feared she had hurt him. Instead, the old chief laughed softly. "You sound exactly like your mother." That surprised her. "She always found her own path," he continued, "and she never allowed anyone to choose for her." Ayana smiled. "Then perhaps I truly am your daughter." The chief placed a hand on her shoulder. "You belong wherever your heart leads you, not where others demand." For the first time since learning the truth, Ayana felt peace. The next morning another surprise arrived. The elders of both tribes gathered together. After many hours of discussion, they reached a decision, a historic decision, one that had never happened before. That evening the entire valley assembled once again. Takoda stood beside Chaitin. The two chiefs exchanged a look. Then Chaitin addressed the crowd. "For 20 years, we lived divided. Today, that ends." The crowd became silent. Takoda continued. "The elders have agreed that Red Canyon and Eagle River will become allies forever." Cheers erupted across the valley, but Takoda raised his hand. "There is more." The crowd quieted again. The two chiefs looked toward Ayana. Neither tribe gave birth to the peace we celebrate today. One person did. Ayana felt every eye turn toward her. Without her courage, the truth would still be hidden. Without her, we would still be enemies. The crowd began cheering again. Ayana felt embarrassed, yet deep inside she knew the greatest reward was not the applause. It was seeing the two tribes standing together. For the first time in 20 years, as one people, and with peace finally restored, a new future was beginning to take shape. The valley had never seen a celebration like this. For 3 days and 3 nights, the people of Red Canyon and Eagle River gathered together. There were horse races, songs, stories around great fires. Children from both tribes played together as if they had never been separated. Many elders watched with tears in their eyes. For years they had prayed to see such a day. Now it had finally arrived. Captain Briggs would be taken to the nearest authorities, along with the documents from the fort. His lies could no longer harm anyone. His story was finished. A new story was beginning. On the final evening of the celebration, Chief Takoda and Chief Chaitin stood together before the people. The valley became silent. Chaitin stepped forward. For many years I believed I had lost my daughter forever. The Great Spirit returned her to me, not as a child, but as a brave woman. Ayana lowered her eyes. The crowd smiled. Then Takoda spoke. Many years ago, Mato brought a frightened little girl into our village. He raised her with honor. He protected her. Today, both tribes owe him gratitude. The people cheered loudly. Mato looked uncomfortable with the attention. But Ayana saw pride in his eyes, the kind of pride only a father could feel. Then something unexpected happened. Kanji stepped forward. The young warrior looked nervous, far more nervous than he had ever looked in battle. Several people laughed quietly. Ayana smiled. She already suspected what was coming. Kanji took a deep breath. I have faced enemies. I have crossed mountains. I have fought soldiers, yet this is the hardest thing I have ever done. The crowd laughed again. Then he looked directly at Ayana. You helped bring peace to two tribes. You showed courage when others were afraid. And somewhere along the way, you captured my heart. The valley became completely silent. Ayana felt her face grow warm. Kanji continued. I do not know where your path will lead, but if you wish it, I would like to walk that path beside you. For a moment nobody moved. Then Ayana stepped toward him. You took long enough to say it. The crowd erupted with laughter. Kanji looked confused. Then Ayana smiled. My answer is yes. Cheers exploded across the valley. Even the chiefs laughed. The celebration became louder than ever. Later that night, Ayana stood on a hill overlooking the valley. Below her, fires burned beneath the stars. Red Canyon and Eagle River were no longer enemies. Children who had once been taught to fear each other now played together. Families shared food. Warriors shared stories. Ayana heard footsteps behind her. It was Chaitin and Mato, one father on each side. The three stood together in silence. Finally, Mato spoke. When I found you all those years ago, I thought I was saving one child. Instead, you ended up saving two tribes. Ayana smiled. Not alone. All of us did. Chaitin nodded. That is true. The old chief looked across the valley. For 20 years hatred ruled this place. Tonight, peace rules it, and peace is stronger. The three remained there until the stars filled the sky. Below them, a new future was being born. A future without old grudges, without lies, without division. A future built by courage, by forgiveness, and by a lost daughter who found not one family, but two.